Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, prepare to clench thine butt cheeks, because this story is about to get good. I am bringing you one of the best bedtime stories you've ever heard, so get yourself tucked in, hug a loved one, strangle a cat, whatever makes you happy. But gather around this fire as I tell you a magnificent story. Once upon a time, there lived a prince. Now this prince, like most stories, was incredibly handsome, much like yours truly. He was so handsome, this man, the handsomest in the land. The ladies came from far and wide just to marvel at just how handsome he truly was. No one was as handsome as him. Many came close. Well, that's not really true. Not many came close, but he was still kind and courteous, yet handsome, all at the same time. It's quite impressive, honestly. But anyways, our prince, he was a kind man, generous, worthy to a fault, loyal to a fault, and handsome. Incredibly handsome. Did I mention how handsome this man was? Anyways, sorry, that's not the important part. Our hero, he lived in a land of tyranny. Although he helped as many people as he could, things weren't as good as they could be. There was a horrible king who ruled over his kingdom with an iron fist. The people were miserable, starving, injured in the streets. They got run over a lot. There were like a lot of horses. They ran over everybody. It was pretty tragic. It's a bit of a problem. There were cat stampedes. The worst kind. They trampled everything. But our hero, he knew he had to do something. And sometimes a hero is required to make the hardest of choices. Our hero had to take out the king so that the people could be free. But how could he do this? He was just one man. How could one man take on such a powerful king? Well, he needed the friend of his good friend. He needed friendship of his good friend. Friend, come to me, he said. And his friend beckoned to his side. His name was, his name was Flark. Flark was gentleman and kind soul. Not as handsome as our prince. Definitely not, almost not handsome at all. You know, he really didn't have the looks. The nature was unkind to this man. But Flark, well, he was loyal to a fault. He came as soon as the prince beckoned him right to his side. He said, "What can I do for you, my friend, my dear friend? How can I be of service to my best friend in the whole wide world, the most handsomest of men I've ever seen? You're like incredibly handsome, like it's scary how handsome you are. It's like with those good looks, those chiseled features, those magnificent abs." He said all this. This was for sure. This actually did happen. He did totally said this. He envied the prince so much, how glorious he looked, but still, he never let it get him down. He was loyal to a fault. The two of them, they discussed how can we take on the king, a king so powerful. Neither of us stood a chance. As magnificent as the prince was, he did not have the skills to do what needed to be done. But lucky for him, Flark was a master in jinjitsu, a lost art to the people. Lost art to the people, not arc, not like knowing the arc, it's art, you know, that is what I said. That's what I said. Nobody says differently, that's what I said. The lost art of ninjutsu he had learned from 3 tribal monks that lived in a sewer. They were the wisest of all. They survived on rats and discarded bubblegum. Whether it was chewed or not, they made do. These sewer monks, they taught him how to become the most fearsome jinjutsu ninja ever to exist. So Flark had the skills, so the prince felt this can be done. So with that, the prince beckoned for his royal steed to approach. He quickly jumped on its back, and him and Flark rode off into the sunset. Unfortunately, the sunset is not where they needed to be headed. It was in complete opposite direction. After a few minutes of realizing that they were headed in the completely wrong way, they soon made a U-turn, course corrected, the GPS said recalculating, and they quickly head back towards the kingdom where they needed to head. Once they got to the kingdom, they were greeted by many, many guards. Ferocious guards. Some of the worst-looking guards you ever seen. These men, they weren't handsome. Not handsome like our hero. Nobody could compare to how handsome, how ruggedly handsome the prince was. No, these men, man, nothing in comparison. They may tell you otherwise, but no, don't believe them. The prince was the handsomest of all. Man, I'm just getting jealous talking about him, you know? But how was our prince and his good friend Flock supposed to get past these brutish-looking men? They would never stand the chance. Even with Flock's jinjutsu skills, there were too many of them. But the prince, he had a plan. He had a trick up his sleeve. Or in his pants. No, it's not like that. Get your mind out of the gutter. Didn't you ever go to Sunday school? Come on. Flock reached into his pocket and pulled out the one most powerful tool that one could ever hope to wield. The magic elixir cheese. This was no ordinary cheese. I think you can acquire that from the title. No, this was magical cheese. Only the strongest of wielders could wield such magnificent cheese. This block of cheese had the powers that one could only wish to possess. For those who would taste its sweet taste, or technically salty taste, would be overcome with just pure euphoria, but then would proceed to die. Because this cheese was so potently strong, so potently tasteful, that no mere mortal man could survive it. Flock proceeded to carefully cut the cheese, but not in that way. He cut the cheese into many pieces, trying not to smell its magnificent aroma. He brought it to the guards as a gift of goodwill. The guards unknowingly took it and enjoyed every single bite. Little did they know it would be their final bite. They died that day with a happy smile on all their faces. If you had to go out, why not with magical cheese? With the men incapacitated, Flock and the prince set on to achieve their goals of taking out the king. They proceeded to enter the castle and started heading up the many, many flights of stairs. Surprisingly, a lot of stairs. This castle was actually a lot taller than it looked like from the outside. Continue to go. Floor 3, floor 7, floor 50, floor 236. Whoever designed this thing was a complete monster. But they kept pushing on. The prince was not in the greatest of shape. He continued to move up the stairs, but slowed with every step. He turned to Flock and said, "Flock, I don't think I can carry on. There are just too many steps." Flock, as strong as he was not handsome, proceeded to grab the king and lift him on his shoulders, like he was nothing but a pebble. He lifted it up on his brooding, muscular shoulders. The prince was actually quite impressed by this. He thought he was the strongest and most impressive in the land. Flock had a little bit to offer, but not in his handsome good looks. We have established this. Flock was not a sight for the eyes. He was not one to behold. The ladies, they just never really, they just don't look at this one. Flock was not pleasant. I don't know how to stress this more. Flock lifted the prince on his brooding muscular shoulders and proceeded to carry him all the way to the very top. Floor 561. Floor 632. This castle was insanely tall. Finally, they arrived at the very top. Whew, what a journey. Quite intense. The prince was happy as could be. He was actually checking his phone and seeing his Twitter profile, but as soon as he realized they were at the top, he was like, "Oh, my gosh, how gracious I am that you carried me all the way up here, Flock. I don't think I could have made it a single step further. You, sir, have done your prince proud." Flock felt good about this. His friend was pleased with his service. What more could a friend ask? As they got into the room, they soon came across a strange desk, and as the chair behind it turned around, there, the prince's eyes caught hold of the most beautiful secretary he had ever seen in his life. And I mean, this secretary, man, she was hot. She had it going on, if you know. Curves, yeah. This secretary, she was a sight for the prince. He fell for her as instantly as their eyes met. Eyes like the ocean, hair like a glorious blooming sunset. bosom as prominent as you can imagine. That is actually, I'm being told that I actually can't talk about that, so... moving on. So, legs for days. This secretary had it going on. The prince was so enamored that he did not realize that she too was a master in jinjitsu. The prince stood no chance. He tried to sway her with his flirtatious nature, his beautiful six-pack abs, flowing blonde hair. Actually, my hair's not blonde. Flowing brown hair, beautiful murky brown eyes. He was a sight to behold. But, unfortunately, he stood no chance against the beautiful Jinjitsu ninja girl secretary. The prince did the only thing he could think of, which was push Flock into the line of fire. Flock could handle this, he was sure. He reassured him that he was proud of Flock and his noble sacrifice. And with that, the prince left as fast as he had arrived. Flock was unsure of what to make of this move, but he knew his friend had his best interests in mind. So Flock gladly saluted his good friend and began to battle the Jinjitsu secretary. Unfortunately, this is the last time we ever heard from Flock. He will not be returning in our story. But we will go on to the more important and ruggedly handsome person of this story, which is the prince. The prince proceeded to enter the final room of the kingdom. Here is where the king resides. He opened the magnificent doors that led into the chamber. He peered in, and in front of him was a king sitting behind a marvelous desk. He looked at the prince, glaring. He asked, "What do you want?" The prince headed over to the king, and he said, You, sir, has defiled this kingdom. You are not worthy to lead it. Hence, I must take your life." The king was like, Bro, no, what are you talking about? "I have to do this," said the prince. "It is my sworn right to look after the people of this kingdom, and you have done them much wrong." And the king was disturbed by this. He glared back at the prince. And with just a small gesture, he said, "Would you like some cheese?" The prince was intrigued by this offer and said, "Well, you know what? I have nothing but time." He took a moment to enjoy some delicious cheese. Strangely enough, the king didn't have any. Well, more for our prince. It was the tastiest cheese he have ever tasted. Man, does this seem rather familiar? He didn't think anything of it. He enjoyed every single bite. Suddenly, he started to feel strange, but he was so happy by the magnificent taste of the cheese, he didn't dare question it. The king, with a grin on his face, was like, "I hope you enjoyed that." Our prince, he nodded yes, and then keeled over. I didn't say the story was going to end in a good way. Not all are once upon a time stories end really well. In fact, have you ever read a German fairy tale? They're quite dark, actually. A lot of people die, mostly children. It's quite horrible. Thing of nightmares. Don't recommend it. But unfortunately, this is the true thing of life. You know, not everything works out. And it didn't work out for our ruggedly handsome prince. Like, surprisingly handsome prince. But as swiftly as he came into our story, he was soon gone. This tale is brought to you by the Cool Ranch taste of Cool Ranch Doritos. Buy yourself a big bag today. Oh, I'm being told that I can't actually promote. We're not actually sponsored by Cool Ranch Doritos. I need to get that across. For legal reasons, I have to make this point. We're not actually sponsored by Cool Ranch Doritos, okay? So just keep it in mind, but also buy Cool Ranch Doritos, okay? They're just really good. That's my story. Goodbye.